Hello, YouTube, and whomever kind soul chooses to follow me on Twitter. It is about time that I figure out this audio because I like this. I like talking. So let's get this thing going by me actually knowing how to do it right. Not wasting anyone's time, and especially not wasting my time, particularly because I just spoke for about 15 minutes to nothing. It's no fun. We can't have that. What we need is interactivity. And at a time when everyone is stuck inside, there's no person to person contact, interactivity, communication is everything. I'm downright fascinated with the amount of interactivity that is occurring on Twitter. Some of the smartest minds I've ever heard words from, heard ideas from, are sharing their thoughts and ideas on Twitter. Absolutely fascinating what it means to have access to that kind of information that, yeah, sure, it's always been available, but now it's all centralized and pouring out of people's brains. Could you imagine if in 2008 this type of platform was available for me to talk to people, for Twitter to be available, for ideas to be shared and conversations to be had? Absolutely game changer. Hey, that's short sighted in the amount of. Uh, it's just a short-sighted statement with regard to what's going on. This is nothing even remotely comparable to anything that was available historically, especially during 2008. Absolutely fascinating. Anyway, so what am I doing today? Got my daughter on the Switch, my wife and my mother-in-law in the kitchen, so obviously people are hearing noise in the background. But what I'd like to do today is unplug from enjoyment for a little bit. Can only relax so much. And in some regards, I work or think about this stuff too much. But if I'm doing that, I might as well share it with people. I think that's better because hopefully, just as I'm saying, everyone's dumping all this information on Twitter. If I could dump my information to people verbally, audibly, written on Twitter, we're all in this to help share ideas and allow people to be best positioned possible for themselves, their family, to weather whatever storm is coming. And sure as hell, it is coming and it is here. We are locked down. That is some crazy sauce. Um, Let me do that. Let me do that. Let's get a couple people. Well, people are filtering in. They're probably finding it vis-a-vis the YouTube subscription. But let me put that in Twitter real quick. Bear me a second, everyone. Updated live stream URL. See if we could get a couple more people in here. But aside from me just rambling, which I love to do, it's enjoyable. It's a curse and a blessing. I think it's kind of a little bit of both. If anyone has any ideas or thoughts or questions, I am more than happy to talk to any topic aside from just rambling. Hold on, verifying. Oh, yes, I did share the link on Twitter. We have three people here. Welcome. Got to start somewhere. Yes, indeed. I did share it on Twitter. I mean, listen, last time there was about 15 people live at any given time. It's a start, and that's okay. So, one more chance. If anyone has any thoughts or ideas, I'm happy to talk on any specific subject. I have a couple of tabs open that are constantly reminding me of really what's happening. And it's not just my assessment because it's reaffirmed, confirmed by the information I see on Twitter. And that's both disappointing, but also inspiring. Because once you understand what's going on, you can be motivated and inspired to see how to make things better. And I myself personally, and I'm an engineer, so I know how to make things better. And hopefully, I'll have the opportunity to do that at some level or another. I have wild speculative thoughts about actions that could be taken personally as well as at the government level. We have a question. Where would you invest if equities, bonds, real estate, traditional assets are going down or there is no value slash no value security in them? Oh my goodness. All right, listen. So my current mentality is obviously based on my own analysis, but it's also and that analysis is supported and a derivative of Raoul Pal, Brent Johnson, Peter Schiff, and just the plethora of sources of information that are available, as well as research. So much information on Wikipedia and just the internet in general. It's speculative. So, risk reward. Have to say that the most important thing anyone can do at this time is protect what they have. And I'm sure as hell hopeful that people have something. And the reality is, most people don't. And that's why it's so complicated. What is the metric? 45% of all Americans don't have $600. That's bleak and disappointing. And this is where like monetary policy, monetary economic theorists come in. And that is with regard to individuals that cannot manage things on their own. They require forms of social assistance. And frankly, that's where like the concepts of socialism come in. And I have a fear that that will be the tendency for things to come. People are going to want social programs because they cannot do it themselves. I mean, fundamentally, capitalism is where people do things themselves and they're responsible for themselves, their success and their failures. But clearly, look what happened. The corporations borrowed trillions and trillions of dollars. They were not responsible for themselves. And if you take a corporation for what it is, it's a registered entity in the United States equivalent to a human being. And they did exactly what the individuals, the majority of individuals are doing, is not taking responsibility for themselves. And they're relying on social programs to maintain what is overwhelmingly a bubble of credit and debt. Bailouts. Because they don't have the revenue anymore to service their debt. They're going to borrow more money to service their debt. Oh my God. How could debt be a solution to debt? And this bubble, as compared to 2008, requires such an enormous amount of debt to maintain the enormous amount of debt. It is not just an enormous amount of debt squared, it's an enormous amount of debt beyond something that could even, you can't even sometimes put your mind around it. Listen, the amount of debt out there is a quadrillion dollars. Quadrillion. How the hell do you process something like that when $1 trillion and $100 bills stacked from the floor well above your head is the warehouse? And that's $1 trillion. What about 1,000 of those? A quadrillion. Talking about a warehouse the size of warehouses filling New York City, 10 square blocks. Oh my God. So what does that mean? How does this work? How does the system keep going? Not system with regard to humanity, not system with regard to services like garbage and trash and water and trucking and food and supply, that part of the supply chain. But how does the system, this financial monetary system, actually work? And every time I try and wrap my head around it, it's so ridiculous. It's not possible. It's to the point where I would define it as pathetic. It is a pathetic system that if this was their best idea, I would tell it to someone's face that it's a pathetic idea. It's disappointing, disheartening. Can't even say the word pathetic enough. Anyway, so the original question was about diversification and how to weather this. I have a couple of questions, and I'll talk about all of them, but let's talk about that a little bit. So, if the system is not sustainable, if you're prepared always for worst case scenario, that is the most important thing to prepare for. If you can handle worst case, then you're good, because if it's better than worst case, obviously you're good. So what is worst case? The US dollar becomes substantially diminished in its purchasing capacity. You buy much less with your dollars. So it gets complicated because, as I said, 45% of people don't have anything. So, in many regards, I'm talking to people in the context that there is something. They have assets, because that is what America was supposed to teach every individual to save. Save. Because clearly no one saved and the corporations didn't save, but there is a good portion of people that did save and they do have assets. So, what do you do with them? I'm not going to put my money in Apple, Google. Uh, the word fundamentals comes to mind, in that there's no way any of these equity markets are going to be driven by fundamentals. Fundamentals are basically a one-to-one P&E. You have a price of a stock that's related to the earnings of the company. We're not there. So I'm an investor, meaning I invest in companies based on fundamentals. Where are they? What they're doing? Do I agree with what they're doing? Are they heading in a direction that I agree with? Do I see growth for that company in the future? And that, to me, is a no-brainer of a way to invest. But you can't invest in this stuff. 10 to 1, 20 to 1, 30, 50 to 1, 100 to 1 P&Es. That's called an inflated value, an inflated price. The price of the stock is not relative to what the company is doing. It's all speculative betting, and that's the entire stock market. All of it. It's pathetic. Kind of hate that word, but it's appropriate, applicable, and it is what it is. So what do you do with your money? Gold has thousands of years history. Can you get gold? It's a good question. If you can find gold, I would put a fair amount in it. I would never put all in it because it's imperative to be diversified. You never know what one particular thing will do, but you have an idea of what several things will cumulatively do. Overall, gold, a no-brainer of a bet, talked about by some of the smartest people in the world. Raoul Pal, Brent Johnson, not Peter Schiff. He loves his gold. But anyone who has a foresight for the future, understands technology and the way things can change, crypto is that change. In all regards, it's infrastructure. It does what every engineer on this planet wishes the system did. It not just digitizes the system, it's a better version of the system in aspects and regards and ways that I cannot state in several sentences. The internet is old, meaning IP and HTTP and TCP and these old protocols, they're old. What is next? When does next come? How does next come? Next comes when there is disruption and opportunity. And that is really kind of why both mixed feelings of not scared, anxiety, but excitement, because this is what is needed for change, this immense magnitude of a disruption. And this will spark change. This will never be the same. Can't be. There's no rewind. Wow, that was a VHS reference. There is no rewind. For any young kids on the call, We old people used to watch TV movies on videotape. Yes. Okay. So gold, crypto is a no-brainer. So crypto is a discussion unto itself. You could get into stuff like that. I love talking about crypto. But crypto, that's Bitcoin, its derivatives, Ethereum, and its derivatives. That's a topic unto itself. Um, dollars or liquidity, because with dollars you can make choices, and choice is everything. Choice is power. Can't do anything unless you can make a choice. If you sacrifice that choice, you're putting it back against the wall. So liquidity, as they call it, want to be able to be in a position so you can buy gold, buy crypto, buy an equity. So technically, I don't discount what I would call unicorns of the new world, equities that will emerge out of this crisis, inflating in value greater than depreciating purchasing power of the dollar is probably the best way to say it. Um, in Venezuela, their stock market was up 300%, but their dollars were worthless. So as long as the appreciation of the equity is greater than the decrease in purchasing power of the particular fiat currency, that's a good place to put money. So I can tell you my bet with regard to equities. I do hold equities, and the only thing I own, it's a diversified bunch that I've held since 2016, is critical material miners, the people that actually pull stuff out of the ground. So supply chains are completely disrupted around the world entirely. Nobody's shipping. And even if they are, they're hesitant and skeptical, and they're not wanting to because there's risk of contamination, geopolitical conflict, price wars. I got a laundry list of questions. So supply is disrupted. What if? Here's that worst case scenario. If you're prepared for worst case scenario, as I said, you're in a good position. So what if supply chains are disrupted, international trade breaks down, and a pursuit of each individual sovereign nation is the repatriation of supply chains? The United States has zero refined critical material product. It is 100% imported. So for the United States to actually start manufacturing pretty much the vast majority of anything meaningful in quantity, they're going to need to build up its mining infrastructure from nothing, which means any of the very small list of critical material miners that are popping up around the country that have been, struggling for the last better part of a decade are going to go from zero, relatively zero, to massive organizations of influence, power, meaning importance to the entire social infrastructure of the country. Yeah, damn right. That is a perfect new world unicorn bet. Now, I could tell you I'm down 80, 90% on those investments. Does it make me feel good? I don't invest in it and I don't hold it because of strong hands. I invest in it and I hold it because, for the love of God, if it keeps going the way it's going, those are going to be the most important assets for the entire country. To build out a supply chain, you need the materials. And I want to be part of that. I bought a fair amount of a company called Namaska Lithium. They went bankrupt. I wrote them an email saying, I don't care how much of my investment I lose. Please let me be part of what you're doing. I just want to be part of it. Owning stock is owning a part of the company. I just want to be part of it. My sentiment with regard to that investment is probably to the point of please, humble. They are the only lithium refining project in the Western Hemisphere, as in everything else comes from China. If you pull lithium out of the ground in the United States, you could barely turn it into battery grade lithium. Barely. There is no infrastructure. There's no mining infrastructure at all. This project, Nemaska Lithium, is the only project in the Western Hemisphere to turn lithium into battery-ready material in a reasonable quantity. And right now, as of right now, they're bankrupt. Disappointing. Was it a wrong bet? No. Did I overextend myself? Yes. Risk reward? I put too much in. I should have put less. Be diversified. So as of right now, my equities portfolios are a diversified basket of Australian, Canadian, and United States domestic critical material miners. So it took a fair amount of time to answer the first question. Do you think government forcing us into crypto? No, government's not going to do anything. Government's going to protect their own interests. And frankly, their interest is stability, social order, and productivity, because all of this fuels the elites, the people that make money, the business owners, because it's all about hierarchy and structure. It's all about not placating the masses, all about control and order. And that's what the governments think about, not chaos, how to target and have a society act in a concerted fashion. It's basically what we have is the modern version of religion. Religion coordinated everyone had a common purpose. And nowadays it's finances and business and work. And that's more or less what religion evolved into. At least what religion used to be was a way to placate the masses, keep everyone doing something similar on a daily basis to keep order and prevent chaos. Well, I don't think government is going to force citizens to use crypto as a hedge, but I sure as hell hope anyone who ever listens to me or watches anything that I write on Twitter or watches anything that any intelligent person writes on Twitter, you should have crypto as a hedge. Now, sure, 1-2%, fine. Am I doing 1-2%? Oh, hell no. I'm an engineer. I built I don't want to say I built the DigiBuy wallet, but sure I did. But I see what it does. I know what it does from a technological perspective. And it's kind of like the same play I have with the critical material miners. It's a new world unicorn. If crypto, not cryptocurrencies, blockchain technology, the ones out there, the decentralized blockchain technologies become the fundamental architecture and infrastructure of society, oh my God, I want to be part of it. Fine, yeah, I'm in it for the technology. No, yes. But the supply and demand rules apply to these particular assets. As demand exceeds supply, the value of them increases. And oh my God, fixed supply, limited supply, governed by mathematical properties. I want to be part of that. The demand will exceed supply. Yes. No doubt. I don't care how long it takes. I own a lot of crypto, and it's not 1-2%. And I work, so I have a capacity to put food on the table. So the value of my assets in the short term mean nothing to me. I know I worked hard to accumulate the value that I put into the assets, but I want to be part of the future, and that's why I own what I own. Transfer of wealth. I have no idea. This is complicated stuff. You're talking about people that have the cumulative effect of governments and trillions of dollars and the ancient families, Guggenheims, Rockefellers. These are ancient families. Transfer of wealth. These people their money is not in the stock market. These people have money in tangible assets. They own the system. They own the shipping rights to supply chain infrastructure. They own the mines, the land, the ground. They own buildings and property and real estate. They own the system. So the stock market is nothing to them. That's my opinion. So you can't really transfer that wealth. They are royalty, oligarchy. They are entrenched. They own the system, and that's a topic that could drift towards conspiracy theories. Yeah, doesn't matter to me. They own the system. That's all I have to know. Okay, so banks. How would you protect yourself when banks are no longer required to keep reserves? Yeah, because that's right now. Banks are no longer required to keep reserves. Zero. That was done like a week or two ago. Zero reserves. So everyone and anyone that hears me, you have money in a bank, that bank does not have your money. You have an IOU. The bank owes you that money. That bank has already not spent your money, but has given that money to someone else. Let someone else borrow that money for return on their investment, which they used your money for as just a pawn. So absolutely 100% the case as of right now in the United States of America. If there's a financial crisis and banks become illiquid and they are threatened with insolvency, they will take your money. It's not your money because you don't have any money. You have an IOU. So the bank will do a bail-in process and cancel the debt that they owe you. It's a bail-in policy. That was talked about heavily by the FDIC and probably forced on banks after the 2008 crisis. So if you have cash in a bank, you better keep your eye on the markets, an eye on politics, because in the event of bank insolvency, you better transfer your money and do something with it promptly, because otherwise it will evaporate a good portion of it. That's exactly what happened in Greece. They took a haircut on the money that they had in a bank account. That is crazy. So, yeah, as of right now, we got to have cash because that's the most liquid stuff, meaning you could buy crypto, meaning you could buy gold, meaning you could buy food, meaning you could pay your bills, meaning you could, that's probably the most important one, you could pay your bills. So cash is imperative, even in the face of the system taking away your money. That's kind of leaves a lot of anxiety. It's unfortunate. So I have no idea what the hell will play out with FDIC. In theory, clearly, if the bank becomes insolvent and they invoke a bail-in policy, that it gets complicated because they have a contractual obligation to cancel your debts to maintain solvency. There's probably policies around that from the FDIC level to the bank can't go bankrupt, otherwise everyone loses everything. And to avoid everyone losing everything, they tell people to lose a portion. So does that play into FDIC insurance? I don't know. We'd have to look up the FDIC policies. I don't know. What I know is that creates uncertainty, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And with what's going on, that sucks. Who the hell wants any more fear, uncertainty, and doubt, especially with regard to money in a bank being haircut, a portion of it being taken to maintain the solvency of a damn financial institution? Ugh, nauseating. So unsettling. It's disgusting. Absolutely infuriating in many regards. I wouldn't take my money out of the bank. Do not take your money out of the bank. Paper sucks. What the hell are you going to do with paper? You're not buying crypto with paper. You're not buying gold with paper. All right, fine. You can't even go out, so you're not buying gold with paper. So how do you buy gold? All right, if you can find it online and you get them to ship it to you, great. I know the U.S. Mint has coins. Buy some coins. You put it on a credit card. You pay your credit card from your bank account, and boom, you just bought gold using money that was in the form of an IOU from a bank that's a piece of shit. So keeping the money in the account is liquid. You could do more with it. You're not going to do jack squat with paper. I mean, paper is literally like the banks fail, the dollar somehow still remains, and you need to go to a store to buy food, and they accept paper, and for some reason they're not going to take a portion, a piece of gold. All right, sure, they're not probably not going to take a piece of gold, but in that condition, they're probably going to be interested in taking some sort of cryptocurrency, because if the banks fail, They're probably not processing credit cards. So that is talking about a hot mess of a scenario that there's no way to even speculate how the hell that's going to play out. Could I get a confirm that people can still hear me? Confirm that people still hear me? Just making sure. Okay, good. What advice would you give to people who are along commercial and residential real estate? I own my property. I'm prepared to lose 50% of its value. Sucks. I own my property because listen. You got to detach yourselves from money. You got to detach yourselves from value. All people really care about is the stuff they have. Does anyone else see that? Because I'm sure you see it because I see it, and that happened. That actually just happened. That was my wife crawling on the floor in the background. Epic. Real estate's going to take a fat haircut. It's going to be horrible. But I own my house. And if you own your house, you're in the best position possible, meaning that's all that matters. Do you want to move? Were you buying your house because you wanted to make a profit? Sure, many people do. But the person that's living in their own house likely did not. And what I'm concerned about is my emotional well being, which means I own my house. No one's taking me out of it. I don't owe any debt. And that means I'm in the best position possible. I have the worst case scenario covered. All right, fine. Listen, there's an absolute shit show about to happen with the Airbnb inflation, real estate inflation. How many recursive scheme is 10 properties has enough income to pay the 10 mortgages? Yeah. Could you imagine the amount of spiral domino effect that's going to play out is even hard. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around that. All of that is going to collapse. 2 months of that, and the mortgages are delinquent. Every single one of those property owners is going to call the mortgage company to put their loan on deferment, which has implications that I don't fully understand about how the mortgage holders or the mortgage service providers, with regard to insurance requirements, and how much money they have to come up with to take into account the deferred mortgage payments from the borrower. And from what I heard, if 25% of mortgages are deferred, the mortgage service providers need to the tune of billions of dollars that they don't have, and they're asking the federal government for money. Everyone needs to get money from the federal government. Joy. What an absolute shit show. We'll see what plays out in that regard. That's what I see for now. The cops with near zero rates. Yeah, man. Dude, we had 3 million reports of unemployment filing. You know what quantity of the working force in this country doesn't file for unemployment? You know how many people were fired in the last 2 weeks? Absolutely disheartening, soul sucking, disturbing. Well, listen, John Monk, it is scary, but don't to alleviate fear. Understand and process and be prepared. And if you understand and you're prepared and you're ready, that's the only attempt that could be made to alleviate the fear. So get knowledge, get information. Sure, listen to me. I get my information from other people, and I'm just compiling it, digesting it, and regurgitating it. But the better you understand, the less fearful you'll be. Listen, I am not fearful at all. I have a shitload of anxiety, but I am not fearful because I understand, I have planned, I've prepared, I've executed, I've done the best possible. And that eliminates my fear. I got a shitload of anxiety, man. It's crazy. Like, what's going on? What's going to happen? I don't sleep at night anymore because I wake up and I'm like, what happened that I slept through? How much did they print this time? Okay, so the word hyperinflation, hyperinflation. I don't that big picture hyperinflation, deflation. You can't talk about things from the big picture with that word because each individual market, each individual product and service can either inflate or deflate. What are they doing? They're inflating the shit out of M1 monetary supply. It's inflating. It was 4 trillion. They just printed 545 billion, which is over a 10% increase in M1 monetary supply. My family gets a kick out of me because you realize, in all technicality, I'm talking to myself right now. Cracks me up as well. So they inflated M1 monetary supply. That's inflation. So if there's so unless those dollars are in circulation and everyone has more dollars and there's a disruption in demand versus supply and there's more demand versus supply, there's not going to be inflated prices of cost of goods and services. So there you got an inflation and M1 monetary supply. Do you have an inflation in prices of goods and services? That's really more so related to the relationship between supply and demand. Now, what did the government decide to do? They decided to send every individual $1,200. Was it families $2,500? Kids $500 a pop? So all of a sudden, a society that has zero productivity, it is shut down for all practical purposes, has money to spend, so demand is there, but supply is disrupted. To me, that looks like the imbalance of supply and demand that causes inflated prices of goods and services because they need to increase the price of the good and service to reduce the demand because otherwise the store shelves are empty and they can't have that. So, yeah, I expect, at least literally from this first round of bailout, for there to be an inflation of the price of goods and services to compensate for demand that shouldn't be there because of a collapse of the means of revenue, means of income. People are getting money when the system has decided they shouldn't be getting money. Now, obviously, there's the humanitarian side of that, but the system has fired people, so the system has deemed it that people shouldn't be getting the money, but they're actually getting money, and that's going to throw supply and demand, boom, out of balance horribly. Now, to keep your eye on things, you got to watch M1 monetary supply at the Federal Reserve. Now, I have a URL. I'll pop it in the description. I think I put it in yesterday's live stream description. Actually, I did. It was the top URL. Now, that'll be a monthly report, but we know they just printed for 545 billion M1 monetary supply. Keep an eye on that because they are going to have to print so much more, is jaw dropping. There's about $4 trillion in an M1 monetary supply. And I mentioned there's a quadrillion dollars worth of debt. That's 1,000 trillion. Now, clearly, not all of that debt needs to be serviced, but margin calls and debt obligations and loan repayment is to the tune of trillions, countless trillions in this global economic collapse. Trillions. 10, 15, 20, 50. I know that I've read that the OTC derivatives market is $650 trillion, and there was potentially a $25 trillion margin call shortfall. Just to get, so the Treasury has the M1 monetary supply, and then the Fed leverages that, gets it into the system, which is why there's a quadrillion dollars out there. It's all leveraged, but the amount of dollars is $4 trillion. That's it. That's all there is in the world, 4 trillion US dollars. So to service $25 trillion, M1 monetary supply needs to be increased by, if the Fed has 10 to 1 leverage, that's $2.5 trillion. If we have a $4 trillion base monetary supply and we increase it by $2.5 trillion, you're talking about that's well over 50%, 65% increase in base monetary supply. If you increase the amount of money that's out there, what does that do to supply and demand, inflation of various components of the system? And that's just that market. Why don't you look up, Google the Fed acronyms, all the SPVs they've created to funnel money into these different systems that are failing around the world, absolutely failing and crumbling because the amount of debt is beyond staggering. It's unserviceable. Absolutely. I don't want to digress too much, but sure. It's a complicated topic that has me concerned because there is no solution. I find there's one solution. That's called MMT, where the Treasury and the Fed just merged, and the president said on TV that it's our money, we could do what we want. And we've heard people in government say debt isn't a problem, and this is all components of MMT, modern monetary theory, that debt is not a problem. The Treasury is going to print the crap out of money, and inflation and the cost of prices and goods are determined by other factors other than supply and demand and the quantity of money that's available. And that's the theory. Google it. Modern monetary theory. Makes me sick. Hyperinflation. So listen, unemployment's going to be through the roof. 30%. There's no goods. There's no supply and demand. The system has collapsed. Listen, you go on YouTube or Twitter, you're going to find videos of Wuhan, China. It's shut down. It's still shut down. Now, you could get into conspiracy theories of whether the shutdown is rightfully the right course of action for the virus, or maybe this is a globalist agenda to trigger this quantity of change, this systemic change. Fine, there's no way to prove any of it. I find them tantalizing and interesting. But what's pertinent is if supply and demand is completely shut down for months, restaurants are done, oil is done, corporations are running on debt and credit. They're going to have to cut back, which means their supply chains are done, which means their more employees are going to be done, which means you have this domino effect. If you think what has happened up to this point is the extent of what will happen, that is impossible. This domino effect will continue long past the opening or the reopening, the grand reopening of society. Long past it, because once everything goes back to normal, no, that doesn't work like that. It's all about momentum, and the momentum of the system is broken. You don't just build momentum quickly. Momentum builds slowly. Momentum is acceleration. And we are far away from even a position to start rebuilding momentum. We are decelerating, still decelerating. Absolutely fascinating, disturbing, exciting, disheartening, anxiety. Not fear. No fear. All right. So let's talk about something less doom and gloom. How Digi Assets is better than a token on Ethereum. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, let's finish the what John Monk is thinking. So this is speculative, and this is where cryptocurrency comes in, and this is where modern monetary theory comes in, and this is where potentially the IMF comes in. I've read about that. What you're alluding to. Sure, but this is what's going to happen. What's happening is everything is changing, and the question is what's going to change into. And this is downright fascinating because this has never occurred in the last 100 years to the extent that it is absolutely, assuredly, 100% occurring right now in real time. Period. All right, so the Digi Assets and Ethereum. So Ethereum has the network effect, which is everything in my mind. History, precedence, Momentum is everything. Bitcoin will not be supplanted, will not be usurped. Either will Ethereum. The network effect is everything. It's not going anywhere. To disrupt the status quo, you need something better. And sure, Digibyte has characteristics and aspects that are better from a UTXO standpoint, has better sound money principles. But I don't think that that is enough to overcome the network effect of Ethereum. It is a behemoth. It is a gorilla in the room in comparison with regard to the scope of its network effect. It's a beast. And listen, so Digibyte's network effect, Digibyte is one of the most interesting projects that come to mind because of its properties, and it has passed its decentralization threshold, which means it is long-term viable. It's not going anywhere, and it is entrenched infrastructure and public utility. And what reassures me in my mind is that anything that's free, people are going to use. And anything that's free, people are going to use to turn a profit. So as the dominoes crumble of the old world and the new world emerges, whatever shape or form it's in, and these public utilities exist, they're going to be consumed and they're going to be to nothing at all. And it will be everything that everyone is currently thinking it will be. So doing anything to it, all right, have some fun. Rebase from newer Bitcoin, tweak up the asset API service. Sure, let's have some fun, but it is not critical. It is not necessary for Digibyte to achieve the success that it will, in my mind, assuredly achieve. Who is going to say no to consuming decentralized infrastructure for free when centralized infrastructure has crumbled? The future that I see for cryptocurrencies is clearly speculative, but overwhelmingly tantalizing. And to me, speculatively obvious. It's a no-brainer. This is just obvious at this point that old sucks and new is good. Okay, so that was a fair amount of talky. I just wanted to get some people together to have some fun today. Talk about the good that could come from the bad. Vent a little bit. Long time. We're not going out for a long time. Wuhan is shut down, and they welded the doors shut of apartment buildings. And teenagers on spring break in Florida are bringing this shit home to every mother, father, grandfather, and grandmother. That's not even debatable. It's kind of obvious. As watch the emergency rooms, watch the numbers, and watch for the peak, the viral load peak, for it to come down, and then we'll start to see things improve. But I guarantee you can't open the system up even after the peak unless we have herd immunity, which has to be a quantitative deduction based on gathered metrics, or an antiviral vaccine. But the whole purpose of a vaccine is to establish herd immunity. So you can't open up the system until you have herd immunity, whether it's from infection and recovery or a vaccine. So it's all about immunity, because the second you open up the system and everyone starts getting affected again, it's all about hospital supply and demand overflow. Can't let the system overflow. Otherwise, it's a PR nightmare. It's a political tragedy. It's a humanitarian tragedy. So we are on lockdown until we have herd immunity. That's not in 20 days. That's not in 2 months. That's not in 4 months. They're not going to open this thing up for a long time. And if they do, better be for a goddamn good reason, because my ass is not going outside. Okay, everyone. 2:02 p.m. on a Sunday. I'll be on Twitter. I'm going to do more of these. Keep an eye out on Twitter. And I look forward to talking to everyone soon. I wish you all a good weekend. You have a wonderful day. Bye, guys.